let's jump over to talk about DOGE. And I want to give you just one perspective on DOGE, and then we'll get into some of the details. One perspective on DOGE that I was thinking of this morning. You know, DOGE is like Uber. Like, it's a bunch of young Silicon Valley kids, entrepreneurs, who really think they can change the world, who have an idea of what could be done, and they're just going to implement. And, you know, if they break the law, that's okay. The laws will change because they're in the right. I mean, that's what happened with Uber. And I'm glad it's what happened with Uber. Uber basically went into cities, ignored city ordinances, ignored state laws, and just did. And then, you know, challenged the regulators to come after them. And ultimately, because it had shown this service to be of value, the regulators, the politicians, ultimately succumbed because they feared backlash from the population. We wouldn't have Uber today if Kalanick had kind of an attitude of, no, I'm going to go by the law, I'll work through the regulators, I'll work through the process, we'll take this one step at a time. No, he went in to break stuff, and he broke stuff. And he clearly violated the law on several occasions in many cities that Uber entered, in not just in the United States, across the world. And they did it consciously and purposefully, and they won. They won. Now, ultimately, particularly once Kalanick was not there anymore, and new regime came in, and now they had already, they'd already established themselves. Now they sat down with the politicians and the regulators and the city officials and everything and negotiated the deals. But they would have never reached that point if they had asked for permission. They did not. They didn't ask for permission, and they barely asked for forgiveness. They just executed on the vision. They did what they thought was right. And whether you agree with what DOGE is doing or not, that's the attitude they're bringing to Washington, D.C., which is an attitude very, very, very foreign to Washington. Indeed, I've read comments from Obama staffers from 15 years ago, saying, God, all the things DOGE is doing are things we wanted to do, but could never get done, could never muster the resources, could never get the system to move, could never get the data, could never fight through the bureaucracy, and we didn't bring the energy, the passion, the commitment that these guys are doing. We're kind of a little jealous, and I think that's right. I think that to do what they're doing, and they haven't done much, and they certainly are not going to do much in terms of the deficit or reducing government spending in a significant way. But, you know, they probably crippled USAID to a large extent, which is a good thing. They have revealed to, I think, many in the public just how corrupt and disastrous government spending is. They haven't found a lot of fraud, a lot of waste, but then most of what government does is waste, depending on how you define waste. But what they've done is revealed just how immersed, embedded, I don't know what the right word is, enmeshed government programs are in all of our daily lives. For example, they've shown us that many of the nonprofits out there in the world, in the United States, are funded by the U.S. government. Now, kind of knew that. Everybody kind of suspected it. Everybody kind of knew it. But it's true. So, for example, the EPA director today released information about how many of the environmentalist groups, and some of the most radical environmentalist groups, are actually funded by the U.S. government. They're getting funds from the EPA. Ian says they lie. Maybe they're lying. I think it's more they're just moving so fast that they're releasing information that they have no clue. They just don't understand. And you know, they're not researching. They're not thinking more deeply. They say the government's given money to Reuters, but it's a different Reuters. It's not the news agency, it's some other agency. But if they'd known that, they would have. I don't think they're lying on purpose. I think they're just being sloppy, incompetent. And the fundamentals of what they're revealing is true. The government is being used to fund huge quantities of NGOs. Most of the NGOs and most of the causes and most of the programs out there being funded in the world are leftist causes, which shouldn't surprise anybody. It doesn't matter who president is. The left dominates the intellectual high ground and therefore is going to fill the positions in the bureaucracy, just like it fills the positions within corporate America. So no matter what the CEO is, his HR person is surely a leftist. So no question that there's a ton of politically motivated or philosophically motivated, ideologically motivated allocations of funds, your tax money going to causes and people and things that are just horrifying for most Americans. I mean, all the money that has gone to Gaza. I mean, huge amounts of money have been going from the U.S. from USAID to Gaza. Right? I mean, 6 days before October 7th, USAID awarded $900,000 to a Gaza charity that the son of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh was involved with. USAID also funded a Gazan educational and community center controlled by an association whose leader once said that Jerusalem needs to be cleansed from, quote, the impurity of the Jews. And you could go on and on and on. USAID has provided more than $2 billion worth of aid to Gaza, which is controlled by Hamas, just in the aftermath of the war. I mean, now. I mean, the woman who ran USAID under Biden was super critical of Israel, super anti-Israel, and indeed refused to meet with the Israeli ambassador until a ceasefire was reached. So while the U.S. was sending, weapons to Israel, USAID was funding Hamas. This is not made up. This is not lies. This is the reality. And it shouldn't surprise all of us. We know this. We know that the U.S. government is spending money on stuff that it should not, that it has no business on a massive scale. And some of this, a tiny little fraction of it, is being revealed by DOGE. Sadly, it's only a little fraction. Right? The EPA director, I was talking about this a few minutes ago. EPA gave $20 billion of taxpayer money to different community development banks and nonprofit organizations that then, at their discretion, funneled the cash to a variety of entities like governments, but also to little eco nonprofits like Climate Justice Alliance. Climate Justice Alliance, one of the most evil, horrible nonprofits out there. Is funded by taxpayers. By the way, Climate Justice Alliance is a big Free Palestine, advocacy group. They got $50 million. Now, this isn't fraud. Nobody's saying this is fraud. But it's good that this is being revealed to the American public. People don't really know this, didn't really know this. And to the extent that this is all at the EPA's discretion, I don't think this is allocated by Congress with this specificity. That's not how Congress works. They allocate money to the EPA. And then the EPA administrator and the bureaucracy decides how to spend it. The reality is that the new EPA director can stop it like that. And that DOGE, Musk, by revealing this, by exposing this, can stop this. So it's not all bad stuff that they're doing. It's not all illegal. It's not all wrong. There's a lot of good stuff that's going to happen because of DOGE at the margins. It's nothing revolutionary. When it comes to, the stuff that's making the news, like their ability to go into a payment system, the Treasury payment system, which nobody outside of the bureaucracy, the bureaucrats have ever gone into. It turns out that, the courts now have stopped them. Trump so far has said that he would follow what the courts say. Musk has said he wouldn't, but Trump has said that he would. So they now have no access to the Treasury computers. For a while there, it turned out that one of the guys, Mr. Ellis, the guy who wrote the racist tweets, actually had read-write permission, could actually write onto the payment system, but no evidence yet has come out to show that they did anything to alter payments. They were trying to stop payments going to USAID as part of their efforts to shut that agency down. But so far, it seems like the courts have stopped them from taking control over these kind of things. And so far, they've been abiding by the courts, at least when it comes to the Treasury departments, So, yeah, they're going in there. They're going to break things. The real challenge is going to be, I think the real issue is going to be, the fundamental issue is going to be, what are the courts going to decide? And much more important even than what the courts decide is going to be whether Trump abides by the court rulings. Now, I think, and who knows what the Supreme Court will ultimately do, but I suspect that the courts are going to side with the idea that Congress is in charge of spending. I think this is a pretty straightforward principle right in the Constitution. I don't think it requires too much interpretation or anything like that. And they're going to say, Trump, if you don't like, not in terms of the specific spends, which are often delegated to the agency or to the secretaries to decide. That's completely, should be decided by the people there. But when it comes to big things like should there be a USAID, should there be a Department of Education, at the end of the day, Congress needs to make a decision. I think the courts are going to side with Congress on this. They're going to place the responsibility with Congress, at least I hope so. And then, again, the question is going to be, what does Trump do once he gets slapped in the hand? Now, I don't think Trump is particularly excited about what DOGE is doing. This is kind of not his shtick, but we will see. I will say one more thing. DOGE is going now into the Defense Department. And at least from what they're saying explicitly, they're going in with the idea of helping the new defense secretary identify big budgetary programs that are, inconsistent with a 21st century military strategy. Now, here I think they're going to use people from Palantir and what's the other company called? Audrill, whatever it's called, to figure this out. But I think you can expect to see things like future purchases of F-35s curtailed, of future build-outs and buildings of massive aircraft carriers curtailed. And I think you're going to see a massive reorientation of the Pentagon budget to tech, to drones, to technological solutions to problems the U.S. military faces. And this might be the most positive outcome. Some of the people, not Secretary of Defense, who I don't think has a strategic mind, but I think there are people who are being appointed lower down in the chain of command who are very oriented towards technology, which I think is the direction the Defense Department needs to go in. And I hope that this is one thing that comes out of all of this that is positive. So DOGE is breaking things. It's making much more noise than any kind of value it's really creating. It puts out a lot of disinformation, a lot of stuff. You can't believe stuff that Elon Musk is tweeting. You can't believe stuff coming out of DOGE. It has to be fact-checked. Everything they do has to be fact-checked. But, they are doing things that I think are important to do. Not fundamental, not strategic, not essential to restructuring government, because that's not what Trump wants. They're not about restructuring government. Jonathan says, DOGE is usurping Congress's power of the purse. Are they? I mean, maybe they are with USAID, and the courts will decide that. But on most of the other things, they're not. They are pointing out how money is being spent. And a lot of the money being spent is being allocated by Congress, but not with the specificity. Those EPA examples are good examples. Congress does not say give money to eco-terrorists. Congress says you should allocate a certain percentage of your budget to, I don't know, advocating for the environment. But who it goes to, if even if Congress even says that, it's not clear. It's just the EPA's director's discretion. Well, that can change, and it is changing. Now, the challenge, of course, is it's temporary. This is what happened with the first Trump administration. You cut or you change or you reallocate the funds now, but because you haven't made systemic changes vis-a-vis Congress, the next administration reverses everything that you do. So at the end, what you're seeing from DOGE is a lot of bluster, a lot of noise, a lot of fanfare, very little sustainable change. Sustainable, permanent change can only come from Congress. Can only come from Congress, exactly because of that. Because Congress has the power of the purse, and I think the courts are going to uphold Congress's power of the purse. But to the extent that they're revealing bad stuff, to the extent that they are, shaking things up, to the extent that they can give the secretaries in charge of departments data and information, because they're data guys, the data people, to cut where it's legally feasible for them to cut, then that's a good thing. Reorient priorities in the Pentagon. They think they can cut 10% of the Pentagon's budget. I think you can probably cut 20% of the Pentagon's budget. And what that means without Congress is that you take money from programs that are ineffective and not good, where you're overpaying contractors, where you're overpaying for weapon systems, and you shift that money to better purposes, all within the discretion, I think, of the Secretary of Defense. And that you go into the next budgeting cycle, and you can tell Congress, look, you can safely cut the defense budget because look at all these things that are wasteful. So this is it can be potentially very powerful and very positive. So, again, we'll see how it all plays out. In the meantime, people are being fired left and right. Again, it's within the discretion of the executive branch how many people to hire in order to do what Congress has assigned to them to do. Congress does not decide how many people should work for the government. So it's completely within the president's authority to fire people. And if it's not, it should be. So, for example, the Office of Personnel Management has advised federal agencies on Thursday to fire most of their estimated 220,000 probationary employees. That is, workers who have generally held government jobs for around 1 to 2 years. Fine. They still have to do what they've assigned to be done, but they can do it with fewer people. Now, following this, the Department of Veteran Affairs has dismissed more than 1,000 employees. Now, that's going to be interesting because a lot of people who support Trump were veterans, and this 1,000 employees that are gone, if that affects the services that they get, they're going to be pretty unhappy and let Trump know. U.S. Forest Service has indicated plans to fire more than 3,400 employees, 3,400 employees. Well, how's that going to affect fighting fires? With next year with the fire season, and what is that going to do to Trump's popularity? They're doing blanket firings, but look, the government has too many people. Fire them. And the government is incredibly inefficient. The government is incredible and productive. So this is good. I'm happy to see people fired who work for the government. I'm sad that it's not done in a more strategic, purposeful, mindful, long-term value way. But I have to say, I don't feel for government employees losing their jobs.